According to URI, some 1,000 New Yorkers seek refuge in their domestic violence shelters every night. In an effort to provide the comforts of home, the program is accepting donations of new pet supplies. Hamilton was one of 8 state senators that made up the Independent Democratic Conference. The IDC broke with Democrats for years to promote and support Republican control of the chamber. On this episode, we're featuring 2 stories about 2 men who live in very different worlds. On the surface, they seem to have very little in common. Vidal Guzman and Harold Searing have never met. The connection is that both men are on the forefront of fights to reform legal systems that they believe have failed them. In 1991, construction crews were working at this spot behind me when they identified the bodies of 419 African slaves. Close to their home now, Me Too protesters took to the streets of New York City this weekend. Hundreds of women and men braced the cold to stand up against sexual violence. CUNY News Update's Camille Smith explains why protesters now say enough is enough. This class trip to a museum took on a special meaning. It was a celebration of African culture.
If we don't honor our ancestors, who will?
The rededication of the African Burial Ground National Monument in Lower Manhattan featured tours of the sacred space. It marked the 15th anniversary of the reburial of the remains of enslaved and free Africans unearthed in the early 1990s. And reinforced the importance of ancestral pride for people of African descent.
It's always instrumental that our children understand their past in order to build a future. It's just very important to me that her and my son really understand the foundation.
In 1991, construction crews were working at this spot behind me when they identified the bodies of 419 African slaves. Now a part of New York City history remains unearthed. According to the National Park Service, thousands of bodies remain buried here. Michael Frazier is the historian for the city's 9 national parks.
7 crypts are behind us, and we had 419 hand-carved coffins from Ghana were constructed and shipped over here.
Flora Gillard carries with her the memory of her involvement in the internment. She was one of 6 to carry the remains to its final resting place.
I remember 2003. I will never forget this time.
In 2007, the African Burial Ground became the first national monument dedicated to Americans of African descent.
I came down here and saw what I saw. This changed my whole life. You should always know that you came from great, great people.
It's the newest national monument in the city, a place where New Yorkers can learn from the past to prepare for the future. Dominic McKenzie, New York City News Service, Lower Manhattan. Welcome back. New tonight, for the first time in more than 20 years, a Democrat wins the Alabama U.S. Senate election. Democratic candidate Doug Jones beat out Republican candidate Roy Moore. Our reporter Reka Shanmugam has more on that heated race. Reka? New York City is finally reopening a subway station that brought thousands to the World Trade Center until the morning of September 11th, 17 years ago.
That is an amazing that it's taken all this time. It's incredible.
The former Cortlandt Street station, as you can see behind me, was crushed after the terrible attacks on 9/11. A year later, the MTA rebuilt the train tunnel to bring back train service to Lower Manhattan shortly after. But this station sat dormant, even while construction on the main transportation hub known as the Oculus took place nearby. Work only began at Cortlandt Street in 2015. After almost 2 decades of commuting without it, some New Yorkers are hopeful the newly dubbed World Trade Center Cortlandt Station will provide for an easier commute.
I got to believe that this is going to reduce by 1/3 the number of people that go on those trains and bring them over here. And that will spread out how packed the trains are.
The renewed station also serves as the latest symbol of the undying spirit of the city.
New York City is very resilient. Nothing can get them down. They'll keep bouncing back no matter what. They're strong people.
The $180 million construction project on the 100-year-old station returns the one train to one world trade in time for the 17th anniversary of 9/11. Dominic McKenzie, New York City News Service, Lower Manhattan. Nonprofit fitness organization Asphalt Green held its 4th annual Senior Field Day today, and it was fun, exercising and dancing all the way. Reka visited Asphalt Green to watch the seniors let their hair down. Here's a little sneak peek. Excitement was in the air.
I'm so happy and so proud to be American citizen.
Ramonda Mikiel is not alone. 143 immigrants became sworn citizens at an event hosted by the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. This ceremony is part of the agency's annual celebration of Constitution Week, which runs from September 14 through the 23rd. The agency says they are encouraging all Americans to reflect on what it means to be a U.S. citizen. Across the country this week, 45,000 new citizens repeated the oath of allegiance, signaling their loyalty to the United States. The group also listened to a recorded welcome message from President Trump.
Welcome you into the American family.
Jocelyn Limuchu brought her daughter along to witness the moment.
I'm going to school, hope to finish school, to be a social worker, also to serve America because they accept me.
Francesco Sivo was the lone Italian to publicly renounce his citizenship to his country of birth. Today's ceremony came with an extra gift.
My wife was in labor, and I was just studying for the test and repeating reading the questions in my mind, and then I had to take 2 hours off to rush here, take the test, and run back to the hospital. I've been here for almost 10 years. I love this place, and now I feel like I'm like a citizen like everybody else.
Dominic McKenzie, New York City News Service, Lower Manhattan. With the rise of the Me Too movement, many women and men are coming forward and sharing their experiences with sexual harassment and assault. And many are now getting their day in court. But this is not the case for some adults in New York State who say they were sexually abused as children. Child sex abuse survivors have ramped up their calls for passage of the Child Victims Act in New York State. The bill would allow victims to file civil cases against abusers up to their 50th birthday. Milana Vin has the story of one man who suffered abuse 40 years ago and is still on a quest for closure. And that's it for this edition of 219 West. I'm Dominic McKenzie.
And I'm Naomi Yane. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.